And I'm not seeing any water coming out of the...
What we know is that we don't have circulation in here. It's getting too hot. So there's two components to this thing. The first component is, which actually there's three. The first one is the flow up this lower unit into the head here. That's one possibility. The second possibility is you could actually have the clog within the head itself. So the easiest way I'm going to suggest we do this, the easiest approach, is to separate the head unit from the lower unit. And how that's done is right here. It's through this connection right here. You can see a seal that's sitting in here. And all we're going to do is we're going to disconnect it and pull these two apart. And what we'll do, we'll go through and clean out this thing, just like clean out a sewer line. And the second one is we'll take compressed air, we'll go through this and make sure when we put it back together, we got those two where the air runs or the water runs through, make sure those are lined. Because this is a Craft engine, it's a Challenger, it's a 5.5 horsepower. And what we had a little heat buildup on our engine. So as we went to run the thing, we were back in this area taking temperatures off this, and I was up around 205 degrees Fahrenheit, somewhere in that neighborhood. So what I did, I broke this apart into the power head and the lower unit. So what we have on the lower unit, we have that water that pushes it up with the water pump, and we'll go through the assembly and disassembly of this. The actual water flows into here to this port, and it travels up a tube, and it'll come out in this position. So the first check I want to do is make sure and again, I've got simple hose here, and I want to blow 90 psi up through here, and I should feel it. Feel that? Okay, so I'm going to blow this, and I should feel about the same amount of pressure up through this. Do you feel it? Okay, so that tells me this is fine. So what I'm going to do now is go over to the head part. Now how this head flows is this hole here that you see over here feeds it up through this circular section, so wherever you rotate the head, it can still flow through. The outlet of that water is here, and that goes back through this port over here. So again, it goes into this circular area, then comes out through this port and down back through and out here. The other thing that I do is when the water comes in, it actually goes in through this milled out area that's in here. This is a cast head. There's a slot. It says that water comes in, it fills that slot and it pushes it through, and again it'll eject here and back it down through your lower unit. Okay, so what I'm going to do, if it works correctly, I should be able to go this way with the air hose. It should come out here. Okay, so when I hit it here, you're trying to feel and see if roughly the same amount of pressure or air pressure you're putting in here comes about here. Okay, and my question to you is, I'd like to have you put your hand in there. Do you feel it? No, it doesn't. Because I feel the back pressure coming out of here. Okay. And I feel it also coming out around these areas too. Okay, go ahead. Here we go. So what we're going to do, we're going to check the head now for proper flow. And again, this particular company, Craft, with this Challenger engine, they put a clean out port in here, and it's sitting right here. So what you're going to need is a 7/16 wrench. This comes off. If the second thing that you'll notice is that we blocked the exhaust portion of this, and we also took a piece of black electrical tape, plugged up that port, and put some paper towel in here just close off that gap. And what we're going to do, we're going to blow air into here and see if we get the same amount of air pressure coming out this side.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go ahead and check that one. Okay, ready? I'm going to put my hand over here.
Yeah.
You got that one? I'm going to blow air into here. Feel good?
Yeah, do it again.
Okay. But there is some there. Okay, so that helps me to understand how well this thing is cleaned out. Okay, so what we did is that we checked the airflow from here to here. Now, if you notice what I did, I removed this piece of electrical tape and this paper towel. I had clogging this port off. Now I'm closing off this one. I'm going to do the same thing and see if I get airflow coming out here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my hand, make sure the exhaust is covered up. Does it feel good? Yeah. Okay. So again, I'm just trying to check all this porting in here, because let me peel all this off now. So I got air and water actually through here, in here, and it's going in here, coming out here and here, and going back in. Okay, so that's kind of the routing of that cooling system. So what I'm going to do, before I forget, put back in my, it's a pipe thread. I believe it's an 1/8 inch pipe thread I have here, NPT. Get this thing tightened down with a 7/16 wrench. Again, it's brass, so I don't want to twist it too hard, but I do want to close it off. Put away this thing. So I'm all set here. The other thing I did is we created a gasket and put it back on here. So what I did differently, the old gasket had a single hole here where this thing was, okay? So what I did is that I opened up the area of that opening a little bit just to make sure I get sufficient flow through there, okay? So I'll open that one up a little bit. Here's my head gasket. I want to make sure that port there is clear and that port's there is clear to get that. So I'm going to set that aside a minute, okay, before I put this back together. Now, this engine, when it's on, this shaft turns clockwise, okay? Which means that this shaft in here must turn clockwise. So when I'm looking down through this shaft, I want to make sure it spins clockwise. Let's take a screwdriver, and I have a gear down here. So when I spin this shaft in here clockwise, that gear should be rotating for me.
It is.
Okay. Now, it's important to know that it does. Now, the other thing is, if you have this shaft in the correct position, it will set down in here about 3/4 of an inch. Okay? If it doesn't, and you're in here working on this and this shaft comes off, when you pull out the head, the shaft may come with it. When you put that shaft back in, if it doesn't sit down there about 3/4 of an inch, what may have happened is that gear may have slipped and moved out of position, and that shaft will not sit down in there. Okay, now let's talk about the sequence of putting this thing back together. Okay, here's the, I'm going to set this aside for a moment. Here's a sequence in which this thing comes apart. There's a cotter pin that goes through here, through that shaft down there. That's what locks it in place. Okay, so I'm going to set this here. So first is the cotter pin, the nut comes off, the propeller, and what comes with it is this roll pin. That roll pin helps drive that propeller, okay? This unit was set in here, like this. Whoop, I did that wrong already. This black unit was set in here. Then this one. Still did that wrong. Okay, so it goes this way. Yep, this way. I'm going to do this. Then this pin, this drive pin, will appear on this shaft here in that hole. Okay, put this down. So let's go ahead and put this rascal back together. We'll step through it and I'll explain it, but I'm going to come back and pull the thing apart. So let's go ahead and I'm going to put it back together and I'll talk through it, but I won't finalize it here. Okay, what we have, I want to make sure everybody sees this. This is the recommended grease that goes in this lower unit, number 2, but we're all the way down here to 0. It's a lower viscosity, but the beauty of this stuff, it'll go up to about 425 degrees Fahrenheit. It'll take that heat, and as it cools back down, it'll solidify, go back into a state. It's almost like a grape jelly, best way to describe it. Okay, it's a lighter than say a number 2. So that'll go in the lower unit. So to put this thing back together, what I would do would be to pack this lower unit. I would set my drive shaft in it. And again, I want to make sure that it's set correctly. I'm simply going to take a screwdriver. And please note the rotation of the shaft. When I'm turning this thing clockwise, this thing is almost spinning counterclockwise. So when this thing is in gear, it's driving like this at that point. Okay? So it's spinning in this direction and pushing that motor. So that unit goes in here. The next thing that goes in here, as far as I can tell, I don't know if that's a brass or a bronze at this point. So this unit will go in here. I'd pack that thing with grease. This piece goes in. I'm going to drop that in there. It sits in there very nice and snug, so it should spin somewhat freely. But again, grease is going to be packed in there. The next thing I put in there is actually the snap ring. Okay, so folks at home are going to need they have snap ring pliers to put this in, but there is a groove down in here. Okay, here's a groove. Let me pull that thing back out of there real quick for you. Get this thing pulled out. Well, I tell you what, I'm going to lift that whole gear right out of there. Here it comes. Okay, so I got it pulled out of there. And over here, you'll see the groove go around in here. Okay, and that's what that snap ring sits in. Okay. So it's going to be very helpful for folks at home, if they can get one, is to get a pair of snap ring pliers. Okay, this thing will sit and snap into there, and that will keep that unit in there. Now, to get the final assembly of this unit, the next thing that will go on will be this gasket. Okay, and again, this gasket will align to the bolt holes, and this is where that water seal becomes important here. Okay, it goes on. Then the next thing you'll notice on this cast piece is this. There is a ring in here. It's an O-ring. And these two knobs will go into this brass unit. But again, for folks at home, this is going to be packed with grease. So get this thing lined up ahead of time to save you some heartache down the road. There's a narrower piece on this gasket and a wider end and 2 holes. So when we finally go to put this thing back together, we'll set this gasket on here with some, we used a Permatex. We did, and I think I got some, but I think you're holding the good stuff.
Yes, we'll get a different one.
Yep, we'll use the correct one. This is not the correct one, but you can get these different Permatex seals in here. Okay. Okay. So to have the correct Permatex, it comes in a blue and it's called Permatex number 2. Okay, this is not the correct one I want to use right now on this particular unit. When I go to apply the Permatex, what I really want to do is make sure my surfaces, which I'm going to apply that material to, are cleaned off, and they're pretty well cleaned off. I use the triple-aught steel wool as to not to damage this aluminum casting. But again, I want to make sure it's smooth and clean, and apply the Permatex to the metal surface rather than the gasket for a more consistent layer on here. Okay. Now when this thing goes back together, I'll set, after I put Permatex on here, in also this mating part, I'll apply my seal. I have my pins lined up properly. Make sure these are good. I got that there. It should slide right on here, I hope. And right into that brass piece. And there it is. Okay, so it sits in there really nice. And I want to make sure I can just take a little screwdriver and drop it down in there. Yep, I'm all the way through there. Okay, there's my bolts. I'm all set. Okay, so that's that piece of it. Now the next one is where the fun begins, and you gotta be careful. Okay, this is where it would count to have like a bucket underneath to catch it. I have a half moon key in here. That half moon key sits in this shaft right here, and that's what drives my water pump. And you can drop these things very easily. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to put that on there. And again, the direction is important here, because again, this thing spins clockwise. So this water is coming in this side of the engine, lower unit. It's being compressed and pressurized, and it dumps into this to create the pressure. And that pressure pushes it up. So I want this rubber water pump over here like this. Okay. Now, on the back side of this thing, I just want to do a check here. And put that down for a minute. Now, what goes on this side is this component. Okay. So again, this is the water, this is the bolt, but this is where the water being pumped into. So I want to make sure this is all clear and really cleaned off. And it goes in through here after I set, and this is going to be the fun part for the folks at home, is setting that half moon key that was in that metal dish right there into here. So what I'm going to do is pull this thing out just a little bit. I don't want to break that rascal. Pull this thing back out. Make sure I don't wreck this thing. Okay. So what I have in my possession, there it is, that half moon key that goes inside this machined slot. So that will go right into here. Yeah, there. Okay. It's kind of sitting out there a ways. So what I cheat a lot. So I'm going to take these rascals and see if I can send it across the room here. Should push back in here. Now if it doesn't, what I'm going to do, there it goes. There it goes. Okay, good. Okay, after I get my half moon key back in there, again, I want to make sure I align this slot back into here. If it doesn't go on there, it's telling me I don't have that thing, that half moon key in there far enough. I have to clean it up a little bit. So where we're at in the process is that we've packed the cornhead grease into the unit, replaced there's a 4-hole copper or brass piece that goes down in here, and we put that snap ring back into its location down in here, so you can see both ends of that snap ring. So now where we take it is, before I go ahead and install these components on it, I want to try to get these holes aligned on the shaft over here. So I want to make sure those are aligned. Then I can make my assembly much easier at this point. Simply goes together like this. I'll take it in here and set it on here. Okay, right down in here. And by having everything lined up, my holes and everything, it goes on there very nicely, okay? So, the next thing, after I get that set, is that we'll put on this half moon key. And to look at it, we have something like this here. Here's a simple isometric view of it. And when you look in the machinery's handbook, they'll start giving you all these different half moon keyways. And this particular one has a thickness of 3/32, a width of 21/64, and a height of 11/64. Okay, so that is that key right there. Okay, so we're going to take this rascal next, and I do have a bucket underneath here, just so if it happens to hit the ground, I can at least capture it, because again, they're a rascal to get in here, and I'm going to try my best to get that thing set in here correctly. Okay, see if I can do this without forcing it. I don't want to create a burr on this rascal. I do want to get it set in there pretty good. That's got it started. Make sure it is set in there well. And if it's not set in there well, I simply won't be able to get my propeller down on there, okay? So it's set in there now. What it's telling me is that when this engine is running, this propeller it spins this way. So what I want to do is make sure when I set this pump in here, I set it correctly. So again, if this prop is running in this direction, I want to make sure my water pump is sitting there. Now the next trick is sliding it over this half moon keyway. There it goes. Okay, so it's set now. And agreed, we all agreed that this thing is supposed to spin this way. I want to make sure I can take my shaft here and just spin it and say, yeah, I'm there with my propeller, or my water pump, my apologies. So once that's set, we simply take the external housing here, and we'll set this one next. Okay, take this guy, put this over here, and you can't see it, folks, but what I've actually done is put a very thin film of grease on that, because there is a bearing in here and a gasket. So again, I want to keep the water out, but yet keep that bearing as long as I can. So I'm just going to get this thing lined up in here. And I'm going to grab my handy dandy Phillips screwdriver. This stuff off of me. Bring our Phillips in here. And okay, so we got this external housing on now for the water pump. We're just going to snug it down a little bit. Make sure she's right. There she goes. The other thing I'm going to do is give it a quick spin. Make sure I got nothing bound up in here. Again, I'm going to go clockwise with it and spin it okay. Okay, so my next step, after that's on, we're going to take it we put in this drive pin. This particular drive pin is 152 thousandths of an inch in diameter, and it's roughly 7/8 of an inch long. And what will happen, it'll drop right into here when I go to set that on there, that pin. So our next step is simply to slide my pin in here to the shaft, put it about halfway in, and pull that rascal back out of there. Okay, that's better. Now we got her set. Okay, that looks just about right. Do the old by guess by golly method. Got it right, by guess by golly. This piece will simply set and straddle that pin. And again, I got a little bit of grease on here, so it slides on there nice and easy. That piece goes on. This driver, that's the next one. Now we get to our prop. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to line this up with this slot here. And there's another pin here. So when I'm done, I should see this. My next pin I'm going to drop in is this roll pin. And this roll pin measures 130 thousandths of an inch in diameter. And it's between 15/16 or 1 inch in length. I don't want it too long because I'm going to have trouble when I go to put that nut on there. So where I'm at right now, my measurements on this thing is about 15/16 of an inch long. It'll simply drop right down in here like this. Okay, so there it is now inside here. I will put, and again, I want to make sure I note something here. Where this slot is here, it's going to, I want to make sure that pin goes through there and through that slot. So put this rascal on here. There we go. I will take my handy dandy crescent wrench and see where we're at this point. And this is where I'll bring my light in here and try to get things lined up a little better for me, being the lazy man that I am. Okay. Ah, there we go. By guess by golly. Got her again. There she is. We'll just bend that around. This particular cotter pin that we have, put this thing back up here, is about 85 thousandths of an inch in diameter by 1.25 inches long. My cotter pin for that one. Okay? So that's just about the finish of the assembly of this guy. Take this thing apart. So if my finger hits that thing, it's gonna probably smart pretty good. So I'm gonna try my best to keep my fingers out away from that rascal without damaging anything here. Okay. And the other thing I'm gonna do is try to tuck this rascal in here a little bit better, so no one gets hurt playing with it. Okay, there we go. Better? Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is that my points aren't quite right here. So it's a little flatter to get in here. Yeah, that's flatter. A little bit more torque on that guy. And we have our alignment pin here. That
Great.
aligns that. Go to shaft it. Okay. Okay. Now, open up this one. Down here. Get my flow going. Yep, that's full. So it flowed right down in through that piping, right down into my carburetor bowl. Only hope I did not bump that adjustment too far out of there. We'll start. What happens here?
Starts over here.
Oh, thank you. Needs a little adjustment, but you can just adjust it in if you want, but you're in the ballpark. My fear is, if you look down in here, I got leaves in there, and we start chopping up leaves and it's going to plug my engine.
Oh, yep.
With Dave's help, we got the 2 side panels back on. We did test it a little bit. It did start for us. It doesn't leak gas. And here we are. So thank you, everyone. If you got any questions, Dave will be more than happy to help you with it.